It was a Wednesday like any other. The bell rang at 5:30 p.m., and I started packing up my things to leave the school where I taught 7th grade. I'm a creature of habit, and my Wednesday routine included a stop at the same grocery store on my way home. The store was small, with a cozy charm despite its dim lights and slightly worn floors. On that particular Wednesday, the parking lot was almost empty, which seemed perfect for a quiet shopping trip. I grabbed a basket and headed straight to the produce section, mentally noting the week's deals. As I reached for a bunch of bananas, I felt a chill run down my spine. I glanced over my shoulder and saw a man standing at the entrance to the aisle. He wasn't looking directly at me, but his posture was angled in my direction. I tried to shake off the uncomfortable feeling and moved to the bread section, hoping to put some distance between us. I told myself I was overreacting, that I had read too many suspense novels. But when I turned down the next aisle, there he was again, wearing a dark gray hoodie and jeans, his head slightly lowered, as if trying not to be noticed. Our eyes met briefly, and I forced a smile before quickly looking away. He didn't smile back. The knot in my stomach tightened. I adjusted my grip on the basket and kept moving, trying to convince myself he was just shopping. When I got to the dairy section, he was there again, near the yogurts, not even pretending to browse the products. I grabbed my milk and headed straight for the checkout lanes, deciding I had bought enough for one night. As I waited in line, I risked another glance over my shoulder. He was near the self-checkout machines, his hands empty. He hadn't picked up a single item. My pulse quickened. I paid as quickly as I could, shoved the receipt into my pocket, and practically ran to the parking lot. The sun was beginning to set, and as I approached my car, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw him, now walking casually in the same direction. I unlocked my car faster than I ever had before and got in, locking the doors immediately. As I backed out of the space, he stood a few rows away, hands in his pockets, staring at me. I pulled out onto the main road, gripping the steering wheel tightly. My house was only 10 minutes away, but the heavy sense of unease wouldn't leave me. I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw a silver sedan pulling out of the parking lot shortly after me. It kept a few cars behind me, but as I turned onto quieter streets, it got closer. When I reached my neighborhood, it was only 2 cars behind. I turned onto my street and immediately regretted it. My house was on a cul-de-sac, which meant I couldn't keep driving without making it obvious I was trying to get away. I parked in my driveway and turned off the engine, watching as the silver sedan slowly rolled down the street. It made a U-turn in front of my house but didn't leave the neighborhood. Instead, it parked at the corner, just out of sight. Adrenaline flooded my system. I grabbed my phone and called the police, explaining the situation. The dispatcher was calm and professional, which helped steady my nerves. "Stay in your car or go inside if it's safe," she said. "An officer is on the way." I stayed in my car, watching the sedan in my rearview mirror. A few minutes later, I saw movement. The driver, the man from the store, got out and stood beside his car, staring in my direction. He was too far away for me to see his expression, but his posture radiated defiance, as if he knew I was watching and didn't care. Red and blue lights flashed down the street, and I let out a shaky breath. The man quickly got back into his car and sped off before the police could reach my driveway. 2 officers arrived and took my statement. They assured me they would patrol the area and keep an eye out for the silver sedan. "It's good you called when you did," one of them said. "Sometimes these things escalate if they're not addressed early." That night, I left my porch light on and kept my phone close. I wasn't taking any chances. The police never found the man or the car. Part of me wonders if he was just trying to scare me, a bored troublemaker looking for a reaction. But another part of me knows better. Now, I never shop at the same time every week and always park as close to the entrance as possible. I install cameras around my house and make a point to check my surroundings before getting into my car. It's been over 2 years since that night, but I'll never forget the fear of being followed. The experience taught me to always stay vigilant and trust my instincts. Winters in Buffalo are often a reprieve, a breath of calm amidst the year's hustle and bustle. That June of 2023, however, was like a cold blade slicing through the stillness. It was when the fragility of my sanity became evident, when the thin line between reality and nightmare began to dissolve. My name is Renata, and for over 7 years I've managed projects at a tech company. My life was guided by organization, clear communication, and above all, an unwavering defense of my professional boundaries. Marcelo's arrival as a junior developer did not at first herald any storm. He was polite, eager to learn, and seemed to fit seamlessly into the team dynamic. If I could turn back time, I would recognize the subtle signs, the small cracks that preceded the chasm. Marcelo's compliments initially seemed like ordinary kindness. "You lead these meetings masterfully. You handle everything with such ease." At first, I took them as simple politeness, a trait of his personality. But gradually, the nature of his comments shifted, taking on an unsettling familiarity. I vividly remember one occasion. After a crucial client presentation, he approached me in the break room, his eyes locked on mine. "You inspire people, Renata," he whispered, with a smile that lingered disturbingly long. I averted my gaze, a lump forming in my throat, and muttered a hesitant thank you, desperately searching for an escape route. That moment should have been the end, the unbreachable boundary. But Marcelo was relentless, an unstoppable tide advancing inch by inch. A week later, the dinner invitation, a polite refusal, the standard explanation that personal and professional lives should not mix. "I completely understand," he replied, but his tone carried a nearly tangible disappointment, as if a darker side of him had briefly surfaced. For a few days, a false sense of normalcy hung over the office. Then, the gifts began to arrive, small fragments of a growing obsession. First, a box of fine chocolates left on my desk with a card, "To sweeten your day." I assumed it was an anonymous gesture from a grateful colleague. The next day, a small vase of delicate orchids appeared, accompanied by a note, "Your beauty lights up this place." The handwriting was unmistakable, the same as the card before. The realization hit me like a block of ice. It was Marcelo. The confrontation was immediate, a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. "Marcelo," I said, my voice steady despite the inner turmoil in a one-on-one meeting room conversation. "I appreciate the kindness, but these gifts are inappropriate. I need you to stop." He seemed genuinely shaken, his head bowed in apparent agreement. "I'm sorry, I never meant to bother you." For a brief and fleeting moment, I believed I had halted the avalanche. But the next morning, a single sunflower lay on my desk like a silent accusation, accompanied by a card with a phrase that chilled me to the core. "I can't forget you." From then on, fear began to seep into my dreams, staining them with dark and disturbing shades. Marcelo appeared in my nightmares, sometimes as a shadow lurking in the office's dark corners, other times as a menacing figure chasing me through endless, inescapable mazes. I would wake up startled, my heart pounding in my chest, terrified of the thin boundary between the real and the imaginary. I reported the situation to my boss, Anna. She was understanding but advised caution, as there had been no explicit harassment, and Marcelo was always cordial with everyone in the company. "Document everything," she instructed. "If the situation escalates, we'll take appropriate measures." And it escalated. It escalated like a disease spreading through the body. A week later, I found my desk drawer slightly open, with an envelope containing a photo of me at the company's holiday party. A candid shot. My face lit up with a smile as I chatted with some colleagues. In one corner of the photo, Marcelo's figure loomed, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that filled me with disgust. Attached to the photo was a note, the sentence that trapped me in a cycle of terror. "You don't belong to them. You belong to me." Panic paralyzed me. Every interaction, every glance in the office became a potential threat. Was he watching me? Following me? Paranoia set in, eating away at my sanity. One night, as I left work, the nearly deserted parking lot echoed with the sound of my footsteps reverberating against the cold concrete walls. As I approached my car, I saw a macabre figure that filled me with horror. It was Marcelo. I rushed into my car, locking the doors in an almost automatic reflex. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it throbbing in my throat. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him. Emerging from the shadows like a grotesque apparition, Marcelo waved. It wasn't a casual wave, it was slow, almost theatrical, accompanied by a strained smile that turned my stomach. A wave of nausea rose in my throat as I floored the accelerator, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep control of the car. I sped away from that terrifying encounter, feeling his gaze burning into my back even after I turned the corner. I alerted building security. Together, we reviewed the footage, searching for any trace of Marcelo. But, as if he had vanished into thin air, he didn't appear on a single camera. The vague explanation from the guard, the empty promise to keep an eye out, felt like a distant echo amidst the whirlwind of fear consuming me. But the true horror was yet to come. One Friday night, I had to stay late to finish an urgent report. The office was eerily quiet, every noise amplified by my growing paranoia. Suddenly, a shadow moved at the edge of my vision down the hallway. My breath caught in my throat, my entire body on high alert. Is someone there? My voice came out as a trembling whisper, barely audible. The deafening silence that followed was even more terrifying. With my heart in my throat, I summoned the courage to peek down the hallway. Empty. A momentary relief quickly turned into pure dread when I returned to my desk. There, on my keyboard, like a sentence of doom, was a note, "You shouldn't be here alone." Fear froze me in place. I made an urgent call to security, my voice trembling with panic. The agonizing wait for the guard to arrive felt like an eternity. The tense escort to my car, each step requiring superhuman effort, only added to my growing anxiety. The next day, I reviewed the footage with the guard again, this time paying closer attention. And there he was, Marcelo, entering the office after hours, moving stealthily through the hallways, rifling through desks, lingering longer at mine. The confirmation of my nightmare. That was the breaking point. I gathered all the evidence, the notes, the photos, the footage, and reported everything to Anna. The company suspended Marcelo immediately, and I began legal proceedings to seek a restraining order. Even after his dismissal, the fear never left me. It was like a constant shadow, clinging to me. Every time I approached my car, I scanned my surroundings, checking every dark corner. I started varying my routes home, avoiding paths that once felt safe. I checked my door locks repeatedly before bed, as if that alone could truly protect me. The news that Marcelo had moved to New York didn't bring the relief I had hoped for. It felt as though he was still there, watching from afar. The trauma-thin visible wound remained open, throbbing. The bitter lesson about the dangers of ignoring the signs, the realization that Marcelo's behavior was never harmless but calculated and methodical, haunted me. The certainty that the fight for my safety was an ongoing battle, both internal and external, became part of me. Caution was now an indelible part of who I was, a dark reminder that the greatest dangers don't always come from strangers. They can be sitting just a few feet away, sharing the same space, the same office. And above all, the painful awareness that sanity can be a fragile fortress, vulnerable to silent, devastating invasions. I've always loved sharing my life online. As a social media manager, it came naturally to me. Photos of my cat, Napoleon, stretching under the sun on my apartment balcony in Los Angeles, a stroll along the boardwalk with the sunset in the background, a casual snap of my morning coffee cup. It all seemed harmless until the summer of 2024. That was when I received a seemingly innocent direct message. The user's profile was generic, a picture of a breaking wave and a username I can't recall now, but it was something related to waves. "Napoleon is adorable. How old is he?" the message read. I thought it was just another comment from a fellow cat lover. 3, I replied with a smiling emoji. 3? So much energy. I've seen you at Santa Monica Pier a few times. He loves chasing the seagulls, doesn't he? The mention of Santa Monica Pier made me pause. I didn't recognize the username, nor could I recall ever seeing this person there, but I brushed it off. I posted photos from the pier often. "Yes, he loves it," I replied, trying to end the conversation. The messages didn't stop in the following days. "That new cafe you posted yesterday looks amazing. Do they allow pets on the patio?" I hadn't tagged the location in the photo. How did they know where I was? My stomach twisted, but I tried to ignore it. I immediately blocked the profile, but it didn't help. A new profile with a different name popped up the next day. "I saw you at the park today. Napoleon is even cuter in person." That message made my heart race. I hadn't posted anything that day. They had been there. They had watched me. I blocked them again. And again, another account appeared. You should lock your windows better. Someone could just climb in. That night, the air in my apartment felt heavy, as if something invisible was looming over me. Even the simple act of checking my phone had become terrifying, because with every notification, I knew they were always one step ahead. A chill ran down my spine. I lived on the third floor of an old building. The thought of someone watching me so closely, invading my privacy, left me feeling exposed and vulnerable. I blocked the profile immediately, but the damage was already done. I started noticing strange things. I felt watched. The shadows cast by the streetlights seemed more threatening. One day, I found my living room window slightly ajar, even though I was certain I had locked it. The feeling that they were watching me from somewhere close was suffocating. The breaking point came with an email. The subject line was clear: "You can't hide, Carolina." The body of the message contained a photo of Napoleon. He was sitting by my apartment door. The photo had been taken from outside the window. My thoughts spiraled into chaos. I called my best friend, Louisa, who insisted I go to the police. "This isn't a joke," she said. The police listened to my story, but their response only deepened my frustration. "Without a direct threat or clear evidence, there's not much we can do," they said. That's when I decided to reach out to Ricardo, a cybersecurity expert I'd met at a work event. He traced the IP address of the emails to an internet cafe in Venice Beach. "The location is local," he confirmed. He also discovered that the profile used stolen photos and was a complete facade. "Whoever this is, they're putting a lot of time and effort into watching you." A week later, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a collar with Napoleon's name engraved on it, along with the phrase, "Forever yours." My hands trembled as I held the collar. The terror felt physical, like a crushing weight on my chest. I stayed at Louisa's place that night, but peace was nowhere to be found. The next morning, Ricardo called with a new discovery. "They created another profile," he said. He sent me screenshots of the photos. They were eerily similar to mine: beaches, cafes, even a cat that looked just like Napoleon. "This is more than obsession. They're trying to become you," he warned. My heart sank. I blocked the new profile and reported all the associated accounts. But that night, as I was getting ready for bed, something happened. I heard footsteps in the hallway of my building. They were light, deliberate. They stopped right in front of my door. I held my breath and turned off the lights. The sound of forced entry never came, but the silence was deafening. I stayed there, clutching Napoleon, until the footsteps finally receded. A few months later, I moved to a gated community with tight security. I also changed my online habits. No location tags, no photos of my home, no sharing my whereabouts in real time. And yet, I've never felt completely safe. The visceral fear of that invasion has never left me. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, convinced that they're there, lurking in the darkness, watching, waiting. And maybe they are. I've been working remotely for years, and the tranquility of my home has always been my sanctuary. But that peace was brutally shattered in November 2022 in Seattle. The routine of working from home made me hypersensitive to any external noise. The doorbell, once a signal for deliveries or visits, transformed into an omen of terror. On that cold, damp afternoon, typical of Seattle, I was deeply focused on a complex project. The silence in the house was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of light rain against the windows. When the doorbell rang, my heart skipped a beat. The sound echoed through the empty house, heavy and intrusive. The video from the doorbell camera appeared on my phone screen, revealing a man in a faded brown uniform holding a small package. He seemed harmless, middle-aged, ordinary face, patchy beard. But something felt off. The uniform was wrinkled, and he avoided looking directly at the camera, keeping his face turned to the side. An uneasy sensation crawled down my spine. I opened the door but kept the security chain in place. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to hide my nervousness. He replied in a low, hesitant voice, "I have a package for you." "Who's it from?" I scrutinized the package closely. "No sender, no label." "It has your name on it," he replied, avoiding eye contact again. My suspicion grew with every passing second. I asked to see some proof of delivery. He didn't respond, simply shoved the package through the gap in the door and walked away without another word. I watched as he walked down the street. There was no van, bike, or anything indicating he was a legitimate delivery person. The package was empty, just an ordinary cardboard box with no markings or contents. Confused, I reviewed the footage from the camera. The man had arrived on foot, lingered around the street for a few minutes, and then went straight to my door. The situation was strange, but without concrete evidence of a threat, I let it go. Days later, near midnight, the doorbell rang again. It was the same man. This time, he had no package. He paced back and forth, glancing around as if searching for something. I refused to open the door. Through the intercom, I asked what he wanted. His response was a barely audible mumble. Then he looked directly at one of the windows of the house. A cold chill ran down my spine. I yelled through the intercom, ordering him to leave my property. He raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, but the smirk on his face made my stomach churn. He slowly backed away, disappearing into the darkness. A week later, I woke up to an alert from the doorbell camera. It was nearly 1 a.m. The same man was crouched by my front door, a flashlight in one hand and lock-picking tools in the other. He worked quickly but with unsettling calm, glancing around every few seconds. I called the police, whispering to the dispatcher as I watched the scene unfold on the camera, unable to look away. My heart pounded in my chest, each second feeling like an eternity. Then, finally, I heard the sound of sirens. The man froze, as if sensing the danger, and fled before the patrol car arrived. The police searched the area but couldn't find him. They promised to increase patrols and recommended I install additional security measures. Still, the paranoia had already taken root. I started obsessively checking the cameras, each alert forcing me to relive that scene. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. One night, around 11 p.m., I received another alert. This time, it wasn't just motion detection. It was a live feed. Someone was standing on my porch. My stomach tightened. I grabbed my phone and saw the image. A figure wearing a cap pulled low, obscuring his face. He wasn't carrying anything, was just standing there, motionless, as if waiting for something. I hesitated between speaking through the camera or staying silent. But before I could decide, he leaned into the door, cupping his hands around his eyes to peer inside. My heart raced. Just as I mustered the courage to confront him, he suddenly turned and ran to the side of the house, disappearing into the backyard. I called the police again, trying to steady my trembling voice. I checked the backyard camera, but there was no sign of anyone. The thought of someone lurking out there sent a wave of icy dread through me. When the police arrived, they searched the area with flashlights, but found nothing. One officer mentioned that other residents had reported similar incidents. A week later, I got the news. They had arrested a man matching the same description. When the officer called to inform me, his tone was steady, but the words felt like a hammer to my chest. The man had been caught carrying fake delivery uniforms, locksmith tools, and a detailed list of addresses. My address was among them, circled in red ink. The thought that my homey sanctuary had been marked, chosen, and stalked like prey left me nauseated. I couldn't stop picturing him poring over that list, plotting, watching. How long had he been watching? Had he memorized my routines, the times I turned my lights off, the moments I felt safest? Even with his arrest, the feeling of being watched hasn't gone away. His absence hasn't erased the invisible eyes I still sense on me, lurking in every shadow just beyond every corner. I tried to tell myself it was over, that I could move on, but the fear has burrowed too deep. Every sound in the night feels amplified. Every creak of the floorboards a reminder that my security had been nothing but an illusion. Slowly, I've attempted to return to my routine, but I am not the same. I lock every door twice now, check every window before bed, and wake in the night to scan the cameras obsessively, even when there's no alert. I flinch when the doorbell rings, my stomach twisting into knots, no matter who's there. My home, once my haven, now feels like a cage. The walls that once held warmth and comfort now echo with the ghosts of his footsteps, the memories of his gaze. I can't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, is still watching, waiting. And the bitterest lesson lingers like a splinter lodged deep in my mind. Safety is a myth. It doesn't matter how many locks you have, how many cameras you install, or how vigilant you are. Danger can slip through the cracks, infiltrate the spaces you thought were yours, and remind you in the cruelest way possible that true safety doesn't exist, not even in the one place you thought you were untouchable.
If you enjoyed these horror stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share with your friends. Thank you so much for being here, and see you next time, where the fear never sleeps.